Eternal Symphony, the Celestial Crescendo. Movement 5, Resonant Frequencies 10 years later. The Rivers twins celebrated their 16th birthday unlike any other teenagers. While their peers planned parties with cake and presents, Elijah and Josephine sat in perfect meditation atop the flat roof of their Chicago penthouse. Their consciousnesses half in the human world and half in the celestial chamber. "We should return soon," Josephine said, her mental voice echoing across dimensions. Mum and Dad invited the Changs for dinner. Elijah's essence flickered with excitement. "Do you think Lin and Wei know what they are yet?" "They must suspect something," Josephine replied. Wei made the auditorium lights pulse in rhythm with her piano concerto last month. Below them, in their home, Malcolm and Sophia prepared for their guests. Now in their 50s, both had achieved legendary status in the music world. Their compositions, infused with subtle ethereal harmonics, had transformed contemporary classical music and opened human consciousness in ways few could articulate. "They're on the roof again?" asked Malcolm, glancing upward. Sophia nodded, chopping vegetables with practiced precision. "Conferring with Elder Zora about the Changs, I believe. That family carries the bloodline, though it's been dormant for generations." "How many have we found now?" Malcolm set the table, his movements still graceful despite the silver threading his hair. 17 families, Sophia counted. All with musical gifts. All with at least one child showing signs of awakening. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of Dr. James Chang, the renowned conductor, his wife Mei Lin, a gifted composer, and their twins, Lin and Wei. Musical prodigies who had recently begun experiencing strange phenomena they couldn't explain. In the celestial chamber, Elder Zora observed with satisfaction. The recognition spreads. The veil thins further with each passing season. Not without consequence, cautioned Nexus. Some humans grow fearful of what they cannot understand. That is why the children are so important, Lyra added. Born of both worlds, they navigate the boundaries with greater ease than their parents. As the Changs entered the apartment, Elijah and Josephine materialized in the living room. Having descended not via the stairs but through a shimmering fold in space, a skill they had recently mastered. Wei Chang gasped, her dark eyes wide. "How did you?" "The same way you made the lights dance," Elijah said with a gentle smile. "We have much to discuss over dinner." Movement 6, Harmonic Convergence. By the time the Rivers twins turned 20, the community of awakened ethereal human hybrids had grown to over 100 individuals worldwide. Most descended from musicians, though some came from lineages of artists, mathematicians, and even certain spiritual leaders. The Celestial Conservatory, as they called their organization, maintained a public face as an exclusive international academy for gifted musicians. Behind this facade, they taught young hybrids to control their abilities and understand their dual heritage. The hardest part, Josephine explained to a class of adolescent students at their mountain campus in Colorado, is maintaining equilibrium between your human nature and your ethereal essence. She demonstrated by lifting her hands, causing objects around the room to vibrate at specific frequencies. Musical instruments played themselves, each note perfectly in tune with the fundamental frequency of the universe. Loss of control doesn't just mean exposure, Elijah added from across the room. It means dimensional instability. To illustrate, he focused his energy incorrectly, intentionally creating a small rift that wavered in the air like heat distortion. Through it, the students glimpsed the swirling colors of the celestial chamber. "Cool," exclaimed a 12-year-old prodigy from Kenya. "Not cool," Josephine corrected, nodding to her brother to seal the rift. "Every time we create an opening, it leaves a trace. Humans with heightened sensitivity can detect these traces. Some are drawn to them. Others are frightened." In their private quarters later that night, the twins conferred with their parents via a specialized communication portal, a mirror that showed not reflections but the distant imagery of Malcolm and Sophia's apartment in New York. "The Soul Symphony incident is all over the news," Malcolm's voice came through with perfect clarity. "Jinho needs to be more careful with public displays. He's young, Sophia said, her face lined now with both wisdom and concern. Only 14. At that age, Elijah was still accidentally teleporting into the neighbor's apartment. That was once, Elijah protested with a laugh. The point is, Malcolm continued, public awareness is growing. Some call it musical mysticism or evolutionary artistry. So far it's being treated as a fascinating cultural phenomenon, but if they understood the full truth. Which is why we need to accelerate the harmonization process, Josephine interjected. A gradual awakening of human consciousness through musical exposure. The compositions you and Mum pioneered are working, people are becoming more receptive. And more divided, Sophia cautioned. For every person whose mind opens, another's closes in fear. In the celestial chamber, the council had expanded to include representatives from other cosmic domains. The growing interaction between worlds had attracted attention across the universe. The Rivers twins have developed abilities beyond our projections, reported Elder Zora. Not just manipulation of matter and energy, but time sense as well. Is that wise? Asked a visiting entity, its form resembling crystalline frost. Time sense in partially material beings could destabilize local causality. They're learning restraint, Lyra assured. And they understand the responsibility. Movement 7, Dissonant Harmonies. The first major challenge to the growing ethereal human community came when Elijah was 26 and Josephine 25. They had decided to celebrate different birthdays in their teens, finding the twin dynamic sometimes limiting. A talented but troubled hybrid named Axel Dvorak, descendant of an old Czech musical dynasty, had broken from the conservatory's teachings. His philosophy, that hybrids should rule rather than serve as bridges, gained followers among younger hybrids frustrated with hiding their abilities. We are the next stage of evolution, Axel proclaimed at underground gatherings. Why conceal ourselves? Why pretend to be merely gifted humans when we are so much more? His faction, calling themselves the Discordant Harmony, began using their abilities publicly and without restraint. They manipulated emotions through subharmonic frequencies at political rallies. They created temporary rifts in reality during concerts that left audiences disoriented and strangely addicted to the experience. The Rivers twins, now the effective leaders of the Celestial Conservatory, faced their first crisis. He's compromising everything our parents built, Elijah paced the conference room where senior hybrids had gathered. Humans aren't ready for full disclosure. Perhaps they never will be, suggested Lin Chang, now a striking woman of 24 with the ability to see probability threads stretching into potential futures. In 70% of likely outcomes, forced revelation leads to conflict. Josephine, who had developed a profound ability to sense emotional currents across vast distances, closed her eyes. Axel isn't just acting out. He's in pain. The dissonance between his worlds is tearing him apart. Which makes him more dangerous, added Wei Chang. His concert in Berlin next week, he's planning something big. A mass awakening event, forcing human perception open to the ethereal plane. That kind of shock could damage thousands of minds, Elijah said grimly. We have to stop him. In the celestial chamber, the council watched with concern. We did not anticipate this divergence, Nexus admitted. The hybrid consciousness sometimes fragments under pressure. Malcolm and Sophia must be consulted, Elder Zora decided. Though they have stepped back from leadership, their experience spans both worlds in ways the younger generation cannot yet comprehend. In their New York apartment, Malcolm and Sophia, now in their early 60s but still vital, received the summons from the council. Age had not diminished their connection to the ethereal realm, though they chose to spend more time in their human forms, savoring the beauty of material existence. I've felt the discordance, Sophia acknowledged, her silver-streaked hair framing a face that still shone with inner light. Axel's pain echoes across dimensions. We need to show him another way, Malcolm said thoughtfully. Not suppression of his power, but harmonization. Together, they composed through the night, creating a counter-melody to Axel's planned dissonance, a piece that would not fight his expression but transform it. Channeling the raw energy into healing rather than forced awakening. In Berlin, as Axel prepared to unleash chaos, the Rivers family appeared, not just the twins, but Malcolm and Sophia as well. Instead of confronting him, they joined his performance, their instruments interlacing with his wild, almost violent composition. Gradually, the musical battle of wills transformed into something new, a conversation across generations, an acknowledgement of pain, frustration, and ultimately, possibility. The audience witnessed not the forced opening of their perception that Axel had planned, but something more profound, a glimpse of harmony between seemingly irreconcilable forces. Afterward, a shaken Axel approached the family. "How did you do that? I was so certain, so committed." "Because we've felt what you feel," Malcolm said gently. "The strain of living between worlds. The temptation to force resolution rather than allowing it to evolve naturally." "There is another way," Sophia added. "One that honors both sides of your nature." Movement 8, Evolutionary Cadence. In the decade that followed, the community of hybrids grew not just in number but in diversity. As the Rivers twins entered their 30s, they developed profound new abilities that surprised even the Celestial Council. Elijah discovered he could perceive and manipulate the threads of musical heritage through time, not just tracing bloodlines but actually strengthening dormant ethereal genes in promising humans. Through targeted sonic exposure, Josephine's talent evolved toward healing. She could repair neural pathways damaged by trauma or illness using precisely calibrated frequencies that resonated with both body and spirit. Together, they expanded the conservatory's mission beyond mere education and containment. They established musical healing centers, publicly known as innovative therapy institutes, in major cities worldwide. They infiltrated prestigious orchestras and music schools, subtly adjusting curricula to include elements that prepared human consciousness for greater awareness. Their younger students developed even more specialized abilities. Some could translate emotions directly into audible music. Others could communicate across vast distances using harmonic resonance. A few could even temporarily transfer consciousness between human and ethereal forms. Malcolm and Sophia watched this evolution with pride and occasional concern. Now in their 70s, they had gradually reduced their physical performing schedule, though their compositions continued to transform the musical landscape. "I sometimes wonder if we're moving too quickly," Malcolm confessed one evening as they sat in their garden overlooking Central Park, listening to the city's symphony of sounds. "When we first discovered what we were, the council spoke of gradual awakening across generations." "The world is changing faster than anyone predicted," Sophia replied, taking his hand. Their fingers still sparked with blue energy when they touched, though the manifestation had mellowed to a gentle glow rather than crackling intensity. Climate disruption, technological acceleration, social transformation, humanity needs the balance that ethereal wisdom provides. In the celestial chamber, similar discussions unfolded. "The hybridization proceeds more rapidly than our models projected," Nexus observed. "Already, 1 in 10,000 humans carries active ethereal markers, compared to 1 in a million just 30 years ago. And those without direct heritage are still being affected," added Lyra. "Human consciousness is becoming more receptive to dimensional awareness. Their music, art, even their technology reflects growing sensitivity to frequencies beyond their traditional perception." Elder Zora, whose form had gradually shifted toward a more crystalline structure over the decades, contemplated the unfolding patterns. "Perhaps it is time to prepare Malcolm and Sophia for the next transition." "So soon?" Lyra's essence flickered with surprise. "They have years remaining in their human forms." "Not a complete transition," Elder Zora clarified. "But an opening of awareness. Their grandchildren are coming." Movement 9, Generational Resonance. At 40, Josephine Rivers married Lin Chang in a ceremony that bridged dimensions. Their union, the culmination of a lifelong friendship that had blossomed into love, was celebrated simultaneously in a cathedral in Montreal and in the Celestial Chamber. Their decision to have children, conceived through a process that intentionally balanced human and ethereal essence, was considered momentous by both communities. Elijah, who had chosen not to marry but maintained deep connections with fellow hybrids and humans alike, stood as witness to both the wedding and, a year later, to the birth of his niece, Aria Rivers Chang. From her first breath, Aria was different. Unlike her parents and grandparents, who had gradually awakened to their dual nature, she existed simultaneously in both realms. Her infant babbles contained complex harmonics that caused flowers to bloom out of season and brought tears to the eyes of hardened hospital staff. "She's the first," Malcolm whispered in awe as he held his granddaughter. Now 80, his hands showed age spots and veins, but they remained steady with the precision of a lifetime of musicianship. The firstborn fully aware. Sophia, her once dark hair now a cloud of white, nodded in understanding. She won't need to remember who she is. She'll always know. In the celestial chamber, Aria's essence appeared whenever she slept, a small, bright presence that explored the swirling energies with curious delight. The veil doesn't exist for her, Nexus observed with wonder. She moves between realms as easily as humans move between rooms. 2 years later, Elijah announced his own news, though not of marriage or biological children. He had discovered 3 orphaned hybrid children in different parts of the world, their parents lost to accident or illness before their nature could be explained to them. He adopted all 3, creating an unconventional family bound by shared heritage rather than blood. The Rivers Chang clan expanded further when Lin gave birth to twins, Harmony and Resonance, whose dual-realm awareness matched their older sisters. Meanwhile, Elijah's adopted children, Maya from Guatemala, Soren from Denmark, and Thabo from South Africa, brought new perspectives and talents to the growing hybrid community. This third generation of aware hybrids developed abilities that transformed understanding of what was possible. They didn't just bridge worlds, they synthesized them, creating new forms of expression that defied traditional boundaries. Aria composed music that could be heard simultaneously by humans and ethereal beings, each perceiving different aspects of the same piece. Maya developed the ability to manifest visual representations of sound, creating living art that responded to musical patterns. Soren could touch an instrument and instantly know its entire history, every note ever played upon it echoing through his consciousness. Movement 10, the passing measure. As Malcolm approached his 90th year, both he and Sophia knew their time in human form was drawing to a close. Though their physical bodies had weakened, their ethereal essence had grown more defined, more luminous, visible now even to sensitive full humans who had never shown hybrid traits. "It's nearly time," Sophia said one winter evening as they sat before the fireplace in their mountain retreat, surrounded by family. "I can feel the shift beginning." Malcolm nodded, his eyes still bright despite his age. "I've been composing my transition piece. Would you like to hear it?" Their grandchildren gathered close, Aria now 15, the twins 13, and Elijah's adopted trio ranging from 12 to 16. Josephine and Lynn sat hand in hand on the sofa, while Elijah stood by the window, watching snow fall in the gathering darkness. Malcolm's fingers, though gnarled with arthritis, moved across the piano keys with supernatural grace. The melody he played seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, parts of it audible, parts visible as swirling colors, parts perceptible only as emotional currents that flowed through the room. As he played, his form began to shimmer. Sophia rose from her chair and joined him at the piano, adding her own counterpoint without touching the keys, her music manifesting directly from her essence. Their grandchildren watched in reverent silence, witnessing what few humans ever had, the conscious transition from physical to ethereal existence. "Are you afraid?" Aria asked mentally, her thought directed to her grandparents. "No, little one," Malcolm's consciousness replied, even as his physical voice continued singing. "This is not an ending but a transformation. We will see with new eyes, hear with new understanding. Will you remember us?" asked Resonance, the youngest, a tear sliding down his cheek. "Always," Sophia promised. "Though we will be different, our love remains constant across all forms." As the music reached its crescendo, Malcolm and Sophia's physical forms became increasingly transparent, their ethereal essence growing brighter. The boundary between worlds thinned to nothing in that sacred space, allowing all present, hybrid and human alike, to witness their passage. When the final note faded, their physical bodies remained, now still and peaceful. While above them hovered 2 brilliant points of blue-white light, smaller and less complex than full ethereal beings, but unmistakably Malcolm and Sophia. They've become initiates, Elder Zora's voice echoed in the minds of all present. Neither fully human nor fully ethereal, but something new, beings who will help guide others through the transition, bringing human perspective to the council. In the days that followed, as the family honored Malcolm and Sophia's physical remains according to human tradition, their ethereal forms acclimated to their new existence. Unlike the elders, who had never experienced physical life, they retained the full emotional depth of humanity alongside growing cosmic awareness. It's like learning to see all wavelengths of light simultaneously, Malcolm explained to his grandchildren during their dream visits to the celestial chamber. Everything we felt as humans remains, but contextualized within a larger understanding. Your grandmother is adapting more quickly than I am, he added with characteristic humility. She always was the more intuitive one. Movement 11, Expanding Symphony. In the decades that followed, the connection between realms continued to evolve. The generation led by Aria Rivers Chang and her cousins matured into their responsibilities, developing new approaches to the gradual awakening of humanity. Rather than maintaining strict separation between hybrid and human communities, they advocated for careful integration. Hybrids began revealing themselves to selected humans, first family members, then close friends, then broader circles of associates deemed ready for the knowledge. By the time Aria turned 30, small communities existed worldwide where humans and hybrids lived and worked together openly, their collaboration producing innovations in music, art, technology, and healing that spread ripple effects far beyond their immediate circles. The transition was not without challenges. Some religious and political factions reacted with fear to what they perceived as otherworldly infiltration. Conspiracy theories flourished. Occasional violence erupted against known hybrid communities. Yet the movement toward integration proved resilient. For every act of rejection, there were multiple instances of acceptance. Humans who experienced the harmonizing influence of hybrid music and art found their consciousness expanding naturally, without force or manipulation. Meanwhile, in the celestial chamber, Malcolm and Sophia had grown into their roles as bridges between human and ethereal understanding. Their unique perspective, formed through lifetimes of human experience, helped the Council navigate the complexities of the merging worlds. The key insight from our human journey, Sophia often explained to young ethereals curious about physical existence, is that limitation itself can be a catalyst for creativity. The constraints of physical form, of time, of mortality, these aren't merely restrictions to be transcended but experiences that forge unique perceptions. Malcolm, ever the composer, developed new methods for ethereal beings to comprehend human emotions. Think of love not as abstract connection but as symphony, he would teach. It has movement, tension, resolution. It changes over time while remaining fundamentally itself. Together, they helped establish what came to be known as the descending cohort, ethereal beings who chose temporary human incarnation not as a full lifetime commitment but as a learning experience. Inhabiting physical form for months or years before returning to their ethereal state. Movement 12, the Celestial Crescendo. A century after Malcolm and Sophia's initial meeting at the Music Symposium in Chicago, Earth had transformed. While still recognizably human civilization, it now existed in conscious relationship with the ethereal realm. The boundary between worlds had not dissolved completely. Many humans still lived their entire lives without direct awareness of their cosmic connections, but it had become permeable, allowing exchange in both directions. The Rivers Chang lineage had expanded into a vast network of hybrid families spanning the globe. Aria, now in her 80s but still vital with the extended lifespan characteristic of hybrids, led the Council of Harmonic Integration, an organization that facilitated cooperation between human governments and ethereal representatives. Her siblings and cousins had pioneered new forms of art, science, and spiritual practice that bridged dimensional understanding. Their children and grandchildren, now the fourth and fifth generations of conscious hybrids, moved seamlessly between realms. Their abilities extending far beyond what Malcolm and Sophia had first imagined possible. In the expanded celestial chamber, Malcolm and Sophia had evolved as well. Their essence had grown in complexity and luminosity, though they intentionally maintained aspects of their human perspective. They had become what the Ethereals called memory keepers, beings who preserved the wisdom of integration for future cycles. On the 100th anniversary of the premiere of Eternal Convergence, the symphony Malcolm and Sophia had composed upon first embracing their dual nature, an unprecedented event took place. In concert halls around the world and simultaneously in the Celestial Chamber, musicians of both realms performed a new composition titled The Celestial Crescendo. Composed collaboratively by all generations of the Rivers Chang family, the piece represented the culmination of a century of growing connection. As it played, the veil between worlds thinned globally, allowing even non-hybrid humans with no special sensitivity to glimpse, if only for moments, the larger reality their consciousness inhabited. Aria conducted the principal orchestra in Paris, her hands weaving patterns that bridged dimensions. In the audience sat diplomats, scientists, artists, spiritual leaders, humans and hybrids alike, all witnessing the manifestation of what had once seemed impossible. Worlds in harmony without losing their distinct qualities. In the Celestial Chamber, Malcolm and Sophia watched with profound satisfaction as the music they had helped birth generations ago evolved into something greater than they had imagined. Beside them stood Elder Zora, whose form had transformed over the century into something more crystalline, more intricate. "When we first sent you into human incarnation," Elder Zora reminisced, "we hoped merely for better understanding between realms. We never anticipated this." "Music always exceeds its composer's intentions," Malcolm replied, his essence brightening with joy. "True creation surprises even its creators." "And love," Sophia added, her essence intertwining with Malcolm's as it had for over a century, "transforms everything it touches." Below them, visible through the permeable boundary between worlds, Earth gleamed, not perfected, still wrestling with human challenges. Still evolving, but now consciously connected to its cosmic context. The Eternal Symphony continued, each generation adding new movements, new harmonies, new possibilities to the unfolding composition of existence. And in quiet moments, when the boundary between worlds grew especially thin, those with ears to hear might catch fragments of melody from realms beyond, echoes of the eternal symphony that encompasses all existence, playing throughout the universe in endless, ever-evolving harmony. End of the Celestial Crescendo. The Eternal Symphony cycle continues in Ethereal Sonata, Dimensions of Harmony.